Welcome back, everyone. So we had a very good first session today for day two, and now it's time for a second session, which is Discovery Systems EBSCO by Mike MacKinnon, who is Director of SaaS and Partner Management for Asia and Oceania for the EBSCO Information Services. Just a little bit about Mike. He's been working in technology for more than 16 years, with 13 of those being in the library industry. He was an early team member of ProQuest's Summon and Inktober protocol products, and an original contributor for Prum Analytics in the research analytics and engagement space. For the past 5 years at EBSCO, he has worked with EBSCO's SaaS services and currently focuses on EBSCO's support of Folio, an open source community-driven LSP. So we've already heard a little bit about Folio in the previous session. So we'll let Mike take off from there. And of course, like the previous session, we'd want questions towards the end of the session so that Mike can answer them. So I will not take up any more time and just hand it over to Mike. Over to you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can start sharing yours as well.
Can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, thank you for the introduction. I suppose that, a little bit about myself. You heard recently, essentially, I've been a technologist for, as long as I can remember, even early college days. Before I graduated college, I was getting my MCSE and my CCNA doing network installs and stuff. So I've just been a technology guy for a long, long time. That said, I'm not a developer, so I generally look at more strategic integrations and how do systems work with each other. And when I went from early career roles into the library world, that's really what I started working on with discovery services in general. We were bringing to market Summon at that time at ProQuest when most discovery services were federated search. So for those that aren't familiar with federated search is generally this real-time call, and it has a lot of technical hurdles that make it really not as modern as we'd like today, particularly as libraries have evolved to look like open web services as far as indexing of content and ability to deliver for patrons and all of those things. So I was able to work on that, which was great, and kind of cut my teeth in libraries, if you will, about understanding what libraries really need to be marching towards as far as both scholarly and authoritative content within a research ecosystem. And that really helped me develop a sense of products and where they sit within libraries. And I've been able to work on a lot of fun things over time. I've always been grateful for that. And that also leads me to talk about EDS here, and in the prior session with Folio, been part of that. So it's been a pretty fun ride so far. So with that said, today, what I'd like to do is I would like to go through a little bit about how EBSCO does a little bit of patron familiarity, if you will. So we do a lot of usability testing. We'll reach out to, say, like Endicott College, which is really in EBSCO's back door, and work with some third-party organizations for not even, say, 808 compliance or usability testing for disabilities, but also just usability testing in general for different user groups, whether those are undergraduate, graduate, and then how do we inform that feedback, and how do we inform that feedback into product deliverables. And then taking that as to what are the milestones that we need to be marching towards within discovery in general? How do those milestones that we believe to be critically important, how do those compare to other services in the market? And I'll be able to speak with a little bit of authority on those. And then also what we're going to be doing for future user ability, user intent, usability. Not only with, say, what's coming for us on a roadmap, but things that we do today as we meet those intentions for patrons. And then lastly, just to touch on what libraries in general should be looking for with flexibility from discovery services, particularly as Sebastian noted around Folio with APIs, how APIs are really important within discovery services as well, whether that's scope searches or integrations with open source tools like Viewfinder or Blacklight. or even if you're just going to be integrating other toolkits within a library like repositories or archives, learning management systems, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So APIs are important there, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So first, just some usability. EBSCO does usability studies every year. We have our own usability team. Some of these we make public. There's a URL down at the bottom. You're welcome to see what we've posted of late. Some of those we certainly don't make public. We do a little bit of both. Some of that's because we may be iterating on a new product, so we want to test grounds on a new product, so there isn't a need necessarily to make it in the public domain. And some of it is iterations on new features or functionality with an existing product, and oftentimes we do make that public. We want libraries to see feedback from patrons that they probably already have services from EBSCO deployed in their institutions, and why are we pushing on features that's maybe coming in a new release, et cetera. Some of the really high-level takeaways here is that our patrons in general don't understand libraries. They're not information specialists. If you look at where they start their services, they start in the open web. They find the library websites to be difficult at best. And they certainly don't understand advanced searching. They don't understand Boolean operators, the ors or nots. They expect Google-esque type searching within library tools. And we know that that's particularly difficult with not necessarily just because of publisher metadata that may be available to provide queries against, but it's particularly difficult because in libraries, we all have authorities and controlled vocabularies and hierarchies of ontology that impact the collections that we curate in the library, and how those collections need to be surfaced for those different user groups. So a general basic search may not uncover the right group of content unless we elevate the subject-specific discipline data within those metadata fields so that they do yield results within a search query. So it's a little bit more challenging than, say, the open web, where a lot of things may have uniform weighting within irrelevancy algorithms. We have to weight specific fields in order to get more authoritative subject data. And to that end, EBSCO does make our relevancy algorithm public, and I'll point to that a little bit later. So just as we expected, looking at students' behaviors, there's a lot of delay, and then open web queries first, and then libraries generally are their last resort, where they'll go and they'll get an idea about what subject it is that they're searching for. They'll try to frame out what it is that their project is, whether this is a thesis paper or whether this is just a generic report or program or homework that they have to do. And then they will go leverage the library, which has the more curated resource. This is good for us in that they have some distillation of progress, but it's also bad for us that as libraries, they continue to be disintermediated between the process about framing out what it is that the students are interested in. And that we as libraries and librarians can help shape that discussion. So it's a little bit of good and bad, but it's incumbent on systems to start mirroring those open web services so that we can deliver, right? If we can't expect users to make that jump for us, we have to come to them. We continue to try to do that within EBSCO as we iterate on features and functionality. So this was patron behavior. Just what they do is search and skim. Here I'm typing in volcanic plumes, and I can see within a result set by looking at, say, the heat mapping, and by looking at where, not even necessarily where the mice may sit for a period of time, but where their eyes go. In our usability testing, we can see that they just scan and skim. They're looking for results within their search query, so that their search query comes back, hey, is this right in the title? Great, that's probably a good match for me. Do I see it in further metadata elements? That's probably also supplementary good for me. So hey, these are relevant, right? This is a very tertiary type of inquiry at this point, where I'm typing in a search query and I'm hoping to get some items that make me click into them. There we go. Additionally, when you get into the item itself, it turns out less is more. When we've asked patrons how they want to see a brief record, do they want the full abstract? Do they want all the subject terms? No, instead what they generally want is they want very brief information. They want clear call outs as to what journal was this in and who was my author, rather than say a citation. And this actually is, again, more modern web-based. This isn't about scholarly or academic visibility. This is what you would expect out of even not necessarily just Google Scholar, but out of Google in general, is you would expect to see a clear call out to where was this found and who wrote this, and give me a brief synopsis of what that is. So some conclusions, these aren't far-fetched. I'm sure that most of you reading this are going to be, nodding your head. Yes, this makes sense. 40% of patrons find library websites moderate to very challenging. 15% have never even used it. And I call that out as a bullet here because I remember one of the elements of the study was asking a patron, hey, how often do you go to the library website? And the response was, I didn't even know the library had a website. So as we're building tools and systems integrations, and it's great we're talking about Folio and Discovery, and Geo is going to be launching a repository that has spotlighting and fantastic functionality. And it's still about how do we get over that first hurdle of bringing patrons into the library, in addition to the activity that they're going to do on the open web, because that's not going to change. So how do we get them into the library? And then once they're in, making sure that they have a good experience and they get to the resources that they need. And so with that, we come to what really actually matters in discovery services. If you're looking across the landscape of discovery services, we believe that this is the critical components, the three critical components you need to be looking at. First is content quality and breadth. Because this matters not only with, say, usability, but it matters how relevant the results are. And the relevant results is what's going to keep patrons coming back. So we need to make sure usability is there, of course, but if they consistently find results that aren't what they're after, they're going to default. Even if usability is great, they're going to default to other tools. So we need to make sure relevancy is very, very good. Well, there's two components of relevancy, and that is precision and recall. And this is the case if you're using Google or Bing or Yahoo or open web search engines. It's the same types of relevancy fundamentals that's used in library services, library discovery services. So what are they? Recall at a very high level is just simply saying that all of the results, all of them, are relevant in some way to my search query. So if I have 10 pages or 20 pages, if I have 1 million results and I'm in Google, well, hey, are all of those relevant to the query that I typed in? So somewhere in the metadata, in the full text, in the title, somewhere in there needs to be correlation to my query. Precision is making sure that the results that are the most relevant do come to the top of the result set. So again, if I'm in Google Scholar, I'm hoping that, particularly with Google Scholar, because this is a struggle for them, is that the publication date doesn't necessarily mean that it's more relevant than other elements within that publication, particularly, say, full text matching or the authority discipline data, which Google Scholar doesn't do very great. But what discovery services can do is they can help yield more relevant results, because we often have better full text indexing and in particular with EDS, better controlled vocabularies and subject specific indexing. So when EDS was really created, you're going back almost 11 years now. EBSCO had already been working with primary publishers globally for decades. And the relationships as a reseller that we've forged with selling content has meant that there was a lot of trust with primary publishers for indexing their content and representing their content the way that they would, meaning that we weren't diluting any of the metadata or any of their editorial work that they had done that differentiates publishers from each other in their own work. We would maintain their all of their metadata, whether it's the full text or the abstract or subject terms. We would maintain all of that publisher data. So they were able to work with us when building EDS, again, more than a decade ago, was saying, hey, we want to make sure that we index and represent all of the primary publisher metadata, and not just abstracts, but full text as well. Now, in addition, we also make sure to work with university presses. We want to not just have the for-profit publishers, but we want to represent where a lot of the scholarly output is happening that might not end up making it to, say, a journal of science or something. We want to have that primary or that university publisher, the press, whether those are preprints, whether those are completed publications. We want to have everything that's available to scholars as they start their research process. We do work with scholarly societies as well. Again, the primary tools that we're trying to deliver on are for the academic marketplace. And so scholarly institutes not only provide us access to content to be indexed and discovered, but also provide us insights into authority data around those different subject-specific groups. So we can have their authority metadata, controlled vocabularies, and we can apply those to publications that we may not have indexed from them directly. We can apply subject groups in this kind of umbrella, if you will, that EBSCO calls our enhanced subject precision. I'm going to cover that in a little bit. But this allows for better discoverability of content. So looking at full text in particular, full text helps us with recall. And go back a couple slides, everybody, that precision and recall. Full text helps with recall, making sure that somewhere my search query is in those items or relevant to those items. I can do that if it's not necessarily in the subject specific data or it's not in the title. I can do that by also trying to find matches within full text. Full text is fantastic for this. However, there are, if I'm overweighting full text, then I can actually get a dilutive mechanic, right? Where I am saying, hey, look, this object over here that's maybe just an abstract and doesn't have full text, if it has my search query, let's call it whale is my search query. If it has the term whale in an abstract and it's listed 4 or 5 times, versus in a full text, I could get whale, say like in a volume like Moby Dick, I could get whale listed thousands of times. I want to make sure that the full text doesn't dilute the value of a term in a much shorter and compressed object like an abstract, or dilute it in fields that are of, say, higher importance, like a subject field. So full text is great for recall, but it can also be dilutive when you're talking about precision. So this is where it comes into play about indexing ANI content, ANI providers. And the top subject specific indexes worldwide look like this. And EBSCO has partnerships with that group there. You can see that we've kind of faded out some of those that we don't have a specific indexing relationship with. But for the vast majority of them, we do. And this is unique to EBSCO's discovery service. So other discovery services in the marketplace have not prioritized subject-specific resources. And we think that that's a mistake. Again, having worked on other tools and seeing how those are architected, we think that the miss here is that these primary resources have their own editorial teams, their own expertise, where they have curated content in these resources. So EBSCO wants to leverage their expertise by using their authority data in search queries, in search algorithms, and saying that, hey, nobody's going to know a particular collection better than these folks, or nobody's going to know a better controlled vocabularies around this ontology than these publishers, than these resources. So we want to make sure we leverage their data, and we're able to do that in EDS. And that helps us with precision. So we do all the recall for all the full text. And of course, full text weighting is still there for relevancy beyond recall, right? We're leveraging is a search query listed within a full text thousands of times? Is the search frequency or search proximity in full text? Are they very close together? Then we can leverage those within precision as well. But using the controlled vocabularies from subject-specific resources helps us with precision quite a bit as well. And we can even go beyond that and say these subject groupings, these subject areas actually have relationships beyond the controlled vocabulary. This is where EBSCO brings in our own editorial teams. And we could say, hey, we have a subject indexing resource like one of those ANI providers I just showed on the slide previous. And they have a controlled vocabulary that describes ADHD in this example as attention deficit disorder with hyperactivity. But a different resource describes that controlled vocabulary in a different way with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. But these are actually the same subject areas. These have the same relevancy weighting. So what EBSCO does, because we work with those publishers, is we create this bridge that says this subject term has the same origin as this subject term over here, which means the results sets that match this one should also match this one. So we create this bridge where subject terms don't have to be identical. They simply have to have the same grouping of meaning. And then we can yield content from publisher A and publisher B so that they're both have a high amount of precision and they come up near the top, even though the terms may be different. And then you'll notice in the query itself, it actually says ADHD. So we, part of this work that we do is we look at not just user search terms, but we'll use NLP, the natural language processing elements, and we'll create a mapping, if you will, of NLP terms to these subject groupings, to these ESP, the EBSCO subject precision groupings we have. And so when a user creates a query, and we use machine learning for this, so the query groupings are continually growing, and we're adding usability tools to this algorithm of matching. When a user creates a query and it is a query like ADHD, we know based on mappings we've done that actually means these terms over here, and let's yield results from these types of publishers. And then, of course, still apply relevancy scoring like search term frequency, volume size. So a bibliographic record is more valuable than, say, a newspaper is. So relevancy of object type. So there's lots of different things that we do around relevancy to make sure that we're yielding the most scholarly and academic results. An example of controlled vocabularies, just in how they're used differently by different authorities, is teaching materials. It's educational media and ERIC, instructional media and PsycInfo, et cetera. But we know that these are the same groupings, and we want to have results across all of these resources so we can map them to the same ESP, the subject precision grouping we have. Here's another sample of that. So teaching materials is the search query, and not only am I getting teaching materials as results, you can see them here in the title, but I'm getting these different ontology groups, these different controlled vocabularies around these different subject areas, so that I'm making sure that I'm getting authority resources as results. So understanding good quality content, and making sure that we're making the most use of that content in a way that meets users' expectations is really important. So then you get into relevancy ranking, because you need to make sure that all of those pieces match. And not only are we indexing them all, but we're making sure that they again come to the top. We've talked about this with recall, and we've talked about this with precision. Using the subject headings is a great place to start. We believe this is the most valuable area to start in, is providing subject headings as a top weighting means we're very likely to get the most relevant objects as results with high weighted subject headings. Then from there, we can look for things that are exact matches. We want to have an exact match on the search query, not only in the title, but in the abstract. An exact match within full text is good as well, although that's a little bit of a diluted value. And an exact match on, say, usernames. So author names or contributor names, we want to make sure we have exact matches on those. And of course, anything else within a metadata that might be a local field. So what we do when we're indexing libraries, particular collections, their specific collections, we can actually have custom fields be brought in and have those applied as well. So that's that customizers elements within a relevancy sorting, if you will, a weighting. So anyway, so we apply a lot of fields within relevancy scoring that we do believe yields highly relevant items in the top. And I'm going to do a couple comparisons here as we look at the different discovery tools, just to show how that really actually sticks. At a high level, this is in general how most discovery services work, and that will discovery services index publisher content and the library's collections. But this right here, this is the rights layer. So what you have access to based on a subscription detail. For some discovery services, this is held in either a local file or even just some collections that they'll have to turn on statically. For most of the big discovery services, whether you're talking about, say, Primo Central or WorldCat Discovery Service or EDS or Summon, any of those larger discovery services, you'll have a knowledge base that is that selection layer, if you will, that is providing you permissions to get access to content, and then thus those results within a result set. So let's take a look at the big three, is what I'm calling them. The big three are Summon, Primo Central, and EBSCO Discovery Service. There are a couple others, of course, out there. I'm not really going to cover OCLC's WorldCat Discovery. And it's not because it's not valid in any way. It's just simply that WorldCat Discovery primarily focuses on bibliographic records on books. Their e-resource discovery is not quite as robust as the other three, and that's simply due to KB and indexing. They don't have a ton of publisher relationships, and their KB still leverages federated search for some targets. So it's not quite as much of a centralized index as the other three are. And then as far as other discoveries beyond that, yeah, that's pretty much it. There's some way on the fringe, but in general, they're not really going to be competitive with the other primary three for indexing size and scope. So we'll start with Summon. Here, I'm not intending to browbeat anyone here. I just want to do comparisons. So please look at these as comparatives. The search query here is Mars radiation monitoring methods. I am hiding the institution that this is with, but this is a real search query. We can see Mars radiation monitoring methods, and I'm getting result sets here. Of the results, when we look at them, only 3 are relevant in the top 10. And some of them actually don't provide us any information about what's there, or the recommendation is incomplete. So why is this coming up? This probably is just either a keyword result, or it's coming up because it's, say, not in the same subject area grouping, but the search term is found somewhere within the bibliographic record. So remember what I said before about EBSCO bridging subject areas in our ESP, and then yielding results from those, because we weight the subject areas so heavily, yielding results of those very highly with precision. This is not what's being applied in Summon. At an architecture level, since I can speak to this since I used to work with Summon, at an architecture level, what Summon does is Summon takes publisher record A and publisher record B, and when they match, they merge the records together to form one unified record. So what this does is this does help fill out records so that the records do have subject terms, they do have abstracts or briefs on them. So in the case that a publisher provided a brief record, by merging them, you now actually have a full record. The downside of this is it dilutes the value of publisher A and publisher B. So what we went back to earlier is those primary publishers that do a lot of curation of metadata. It takes that publisher's metadata and it weights that metadata the same as anybody else that has the same record. So by doing that, the editorial work that a subject-specific expert has done to the bibliographic record is not as curated as the merged record at the end. I hope that makes sense. So in this end, it hurts precision. It helps on recall, so you'll see a lot of results generally come back in Summon, but it hurts on precision in the top result sets. That's what we're seeing here. I've done a lot of these, and again, I've sent this file as something that the team can make use of going forward, so you can have some of these comparisons. But there's again a lot of misses in the top 10, and this is because of that recall element not being very precise. By merging the records together, it does good for the precision element. It does good for recall, but it hurts precision merging the records together. Okay, so looking at Primo Central, we're going to run the same search query. And in recent years, I know Sebastian talked about it, that there has been kind of a distillation of the ILS landscape with systems providers for integrated library services systems. But there's also been a distillation amongst discovery services as well. ProQuest owns Summon, and ProQuest recently purchased Ex Libris, which previously had owned Primo Central. So before I do a little bit of discussion about Primo Central, I want to talk about that, just so that we're all on the same page. First, Primo Central actually started as Primo, and Primo was an OPAC. Primo was focused on discovering books, physical collections in libraries. It didn't have an attached knowledge base. There was a secondary index for that, and it was federated search. Then as Ex Libris evolved and Primo evolved, there was the Primo Central Index, where Ex Libris started indexing content from publishers, and it did have a knowledge base attached to it. So that improved over time. With the acquisition of Ex Libris by ProQuest, the index for Summon and the index for Primo Central have merged. So now it's one index. It's called the Central Discovery Index, CDI, but still functionally, Primo still is derived out of an OPAC, which means most of the results that you're going to get in a top 10 come back as physical collections in an item in the range of, say, like 4 out of 10 or 5 out of 10. And that's pretty heavy. When you think even 40 or 50% of a top 10 are going to be bibliographic collections, that's pretty heavy when you think that most libraries' e-resource footprints are much bigger than their print footprint is. And their library spend is usually much higher on e-resources than on their physical. So this is a functional, I don't want to say limitation, but it's a functional piece of Primo Central, is that it's Primo. It's looking for physical collections. It weights physical collections highly. And of course, you could do that in EDS. If I wanted to statically weight my local collection, I wanted to statically weight items on the shelf, I could do that. But by default, that's not the go-to by default is to find the most relevant items within what's being indexed. And Primo Central has a little bit of a challenge there simply because of the origins, the technological debt, if you will, origins of Primo Central. Okay, so same types of challenges though, because it's leveraging the same index as Summon, and that we're merging records together to form these uniform records, which means our recall will be good, but our precision will be a little bit of a miss. So our top results generally are going to be hurt by them. It's hard to understand how some of the items become part of the top 10 when you actually find some misses. And, you'll find matches on the search query itself, whether it's in the title of the abstract, but the relevancy about why is this item coming up doesn't really make a lot of sense. So this is that precision piece, right? Where EDS spends a lot of time working on precision because we index all of that extra subject-specific discipline data from primary publisher resources, and we don't merge those, we don't blend those types of records together, we weight them very heavily. So we'll see that here, again, same type of query, Mars radiation monitoring methods, and within a search result, I'm going to see some pretty relevant items. Recency is always good. We want to see some recent items, particularly from a scholarly or academic standpoint. We want to see not just results from in a title or an abstract, but we want to see the specific call out here. So you're seeing, hey, a method, radiation monitoring methods, exactly what my search is in a subject area, right? This is a scholarly match. And this is an open access resource found in PubMed. So in the ability for the other services to have it, 100% possible, but you're seeing these kinds of misses. And that's because of how the relevancy algorithm scoring in EDS is, heavily weighting the scholarly and academic fields from those primary publishers. Just closing these out as we go through these. And that's relevancy in a nutshell. This is why we spend a lot of time on relevancy, but it all comes from our ability to work with primary publishers from decades of experience and represent their content, including those A&I resources. Okay, so once at a high level, you feel like, well, we've got a good understanding now about how discovery works in general, the recall precision. We've got a good understanding about how EBSCO indexes content and represents primary publisher metadata. Now is about how do we get usability out of it. So we want to make sure that we're delivering on that modern user, that patron requirement of the open web. It's really a challenge to go from, we're looking for scoped scholarly resources, we need to show these specific fields and say institutional affiliation and primary author and subject metadata. And we need to show all of this to also be simplified in a way that meets web discovery, right? Web searching. So we can do that with some individual feature functionality, just areas where we're able to plug in functionality rather than have to depend on the relevancy or just how a brief is showing. We're going to do that too, but we can plug in feature functionality that models open web searching. So in this query, I'm searching for nature. This is what, and you'll see this too as GeoDigital Library gets born and you start being able to look at user queries. If you're able to do some analysis on your own queries, you'll see most user queries are very simple, often a single word or a copy and paste. And so how do we still deliver not only results, so successful results matching, but maybe solve for what their query is actually searching for? So here's this query for nature, and we're not sure, are they looking for a book, a physical book on the shelf? Are they looking for Nature, the journal? Well, what we can do is we can actually plug in a search box that says, no, not only do you want to see Nature, the journal, but I want to search within that journal. So there's little things we can do to point users towards what we think that they're looking for, as well as give result sets. Web of Science, hey, are you actually looking for specific database that we have, the Web of Science from Clarivate? Are you looking for a specific journal? Well, maybe not a journal, but I could actually target you towards some context. Maybe you're starting your research process and you don't quite know what it is that you're looking for. This is maybe a class that you're taking or a subject area that the professor told you to go look in. So you're just doing real topical queries for now. So let me give you some context with a research starter. For just even, non-specific search queries about results, how about library hours? We know that oftentimes patrons just are going to go to any search box and type in anything. And so you'll see everything from, I've seen things like restroom locations. So, anything that libraries or that patrons can type in there, they often do. And we want to be able to solve for that. So in this case, it's library hours. But we also want to do other things that we know open web tools do, like Google, where we can anticipate what they're actually after and say, hey, did you mean? Well, no, not just did you mean, but I'm actually going to show you results for the correct spelling instead of what your query was. If you really want this query, go ahead and click here and we'll give you that other query. I mentioned copy and pasting full citations. This is certainly something we want to support as well. Patrons do this quite a bit. They may, again, they're starting their open web query in Google or Wikipedia, and they copy and paste a citation. We want to be able to deliver that within the library collections too. EDS and responsive design. This is, a requirement today. Patrons often start on mobile, even in their own classroom, or they're in a coffee shop. They're walking, or they're in some other location, and they're not at a full computer. And so we want to have responsive design. All of EBSCO services are responsive. We also want to deliver on a mobile app, and we want the ability for patrons to go from the mobile app, save items that they found relevant in the mobile app. Then if they get to a laptop or they come into a terminal at the library or whatever full environment they're in, and they're able to sign back in, then all of those items that they saved are now able to be used again within their profile. So mobile app is, for those that didn't know, you can go out to the Android and Apple app stores today, respectively, and get the EBSCO mobile app. It's free to download, and then it'll ask you to authenticate with your institution. So you can sign in there, and that layer of authentication detects what type of access your institution has to EBSCO subscriptions and EBSCO services. So if you have EDS at your library, then you'll be able to deploy EDS in your mobile right there from the same mobile app. If you don't have EDS, then you will only get access to the specific EBSCO collections that you have subscribed to. So we want to make sure that patrons have real easy access. They can go and they can get the mobile app, and they could type in their institution name, and now they'll always have access on their mobile right to the library collections. If they don't want to do the mobile app and they want to just use the open web, again, responsive design, that's no problem. They could go to their Chrome or Firefox or whatever app that they have for web browsing on their phone, get access to those collections there. And then if Geo obviously ends up, the Geo Institute obviously ends up launching their own app, then we want to be able to support your own app as well. And of course, APIs that come from EBSCO services can be plugged into that too. So any way that users can come in from mobile, we want to be supportive. We think that that's a major portion of user access point today, and not supporting it both with apps as well as simply web functionality from a phone is a mistake. Just some functionality here with features. Of course, we need to make sure we have the ability to get access to the objects, to save objects, to come into, say, right into a journal or title, and then bridge out from there if we need to within our saved profile. So making sure that we're delivering on some of those user expectations is really important as well. Okay, so with that, I wanted to talk, those are all functionality that's available today. That's all what we think from EBSCO. That's all what we think is competitive today as well. When you look across discovery services in general, these are really the criteria that are requisite in my experience, not just from EBSCO, but from others, is fantastic content underneath, the ability to find that content in an accurate way right away. Users don't scroll, users don't do any pagination. They're looking for a top 4, top 5 result at best. So making sure your precision is really good, and then making sure that your usability is fantastic as well. Otherwise, they won't come back too. So it's rather challenging, but that's really the requirement in today's discovery landscape. But I want to talk about what other things that we're continuing to do, and this is really roadmap. This is futures from EBSCO. So some of this is just simply about updating the UX. Users have short attention spans, and the UX, the existing UX for EDS, is probably a decade old by now. And so we need to make sure that we have iterations on that. And what we've been deploying on, been working on so far is not just the new UX, but a better framework internally, organizationally, so that when we do want to iterate, it's easier for us to do than these large wholesale projects, which is what this current iteration has been. It's been a multi-year project. And we need to get better organizationally at providing faster go-to-markets with UX support. So this has been, kind of a learning experience organizationally for us, as well as an iterative improvement for EBSCO and ability to continue to scale to libraries moving forward. But that said, what we're shipping is actually going to be pretty good. Super modern UX with all of that same underlying metadata work, same underlying relevancy scoring, so same curated expert results and flexibility with features, just in a more modern UX. So here I am, I'm at a default page. I haven't signed in. I can sign in. I can get the same types of functionality with placards for exact match placards. I can make sure to see which objects are peer reviewed. I can save and like objects. Sorry, over here, notice that I can like objects. And go ahead and do some filtering and sorting based on whatever it is my requirement that I'm looking for in a nice intuitive way. I can cite items right from a results set, or I could click in to cite them. And you'll see this addition about adding it to a project. Now, this goes back to what we talked about with mobile before, about wanting to be seamless from mobile access into full access to a site. If I add objects in my mobile, I want to make sure that I'm able to come back in and see those objects that I've added within a saved folder. However, one saved folder might not be a great user experience. I in general might be working on multiple projects at once because I'm taking multiple courses, or I have multiple tasks. And so being able to create multiple folders that are project aligned it allows me to compartmentalize the results and the queries that I use. So I can cite them right from results set, multiple citation formats, of course, but I can also add these to projects and create lots of projects with descriptions and due dates around when those projects need to be coming up. So I kind of get my own project management tool within EDS. I can share my results in a project to other project members if I wanted to. So if I am working on a group project, I can now enable other members to say, hey, I've done some work in the library. I found some items that are relevant to our project. Hey, check these out. And I could save those or share those. I could even put it into, say, some hosted areas that might not be on my device specific, or even like an EBSCO folder. I could put them into a cloud drive. So if this is, say, like a Google Classroom, that's great. But if it's in something else, if it's a geo-specific folder, you can do that too. Of course, I want to be able to download and get access to the items. Maybe that's specific to a chapter. So if I'm in a book, I want to just download a specific chapter. I could do that. I could do that for the whole title. It's obviously going to depend on the licensing rights for that object. but I want to make it easy. So here I am scrolling down, and you can see I could get access to a specific chapter. Maybe I just want to download a chapter, or I could download that whole item. So the usability, I think, is really important. Sorry, coming back here. The usability, I think, is really important to see that, hey, I've got a personalized folder. I can save these objects, read these objects, cite these objects, and share these objects. And I can do it in a way that makes a lot of sense. And the modern look and feel, I think, is what will keep a lot of them coming back to. Okay. And then looking forward here, as we're kind of wrapping up. I think we've got a little bit of time left here, but as we're looking forward, I want to really highlight the API portion of discovery services and EDS. We have not only had multiple APIs in the past, so we've had what we call the EIT, it's the EBSCO Information Toolkit. It's really kind of a brief API. We've had a robust API with the EDS API that has all field availability. And we're even now developing and iterating on an EBSCO API, which is a holistic API across all EBSCO platforms and services. So we really do see that API uses and institutional customization is really kind of a norm now, in that you may not all institutions are going to deploy, a viewfind or a blacklight, but they are going to have these custom one-off projects that they want libraries to be able to support, whether that's department-based, whether that's a learning management system integration or something. The ability to get access to APIs to support that flexibility is really important. So I'm going to show a couple samples here of just what some libraries have done. But EBSCO's deployment of API and availability of those APIs, we feel is part and parcel with libraries using EDS in general. So all libraries that subscribe to EBSCO Discovery Service have access to APIs so that they can do these custom projects that they have. We want to be enabling libraries, not creating any kind of barriers for them. So this is a viewfind integration at Villanova. Villanova actually, originated viewfind decades ago and 16 years ago as an OPAC primarily. But then, it's open source, and they've continued to curate it. Of more immediacy, more recency, viewfind has found itself into the OLF group, the Open Library Foundation that Folio is governed by. So there is some synergy between viewfind and Folio, as well as viewfind and EBSCO's affiliation with Folio. So Villanova is using EDS right here for their articles and more content. This is our EDS API for results, and then they've got their catalog as providing results over here, as well as non-library specific resources, so the library website. This style, where you have these kind of 3 columns, is commonly called a bento box, and we'll see some more bento boxes coming up here. I know we've got several Stanford associates, colleagues presenting for this event for GEO, and they've done a lot of custom work on it, which is fantastic. And this is what they're doing in SearchWorks with the EDS API, where they're looking across all of the collections that they have. But I think what's being leveraged here in the EDS API is citation-specific information around copyright. So a lot of customization that you can do within the API, but if that's incorrect, forgive me, Stanford. But I think that's what they're doing. But this is a blacklight front end as well. So again, EDS doesn't have to connect to just one or another front end. It's really very flexible. Here I am at Ohio State University, another bento box where they've got Articles Plus coming in. This is the EDS API, a catalog, and then their discipline-specific librarians. So if you're looking for social media and depression, this is actually telling you to go talk to this faculty member over here about social work. So they're looking for discipline-specific relationships across faculty and pointing users to that. It's a nice integration, nice call out. Smith College's another bento box. You can see Articles Plus here for EDS, the catalog over here, but they've tried to call out media specifically. And I think that, you know, a lot of patrons are looking for that. They're looking for media callouts. So I kind of like that integration that's done here. I do wish there's a little bit more of a visible thumbnail on it, but calling it out by category of content, I like. Here I am at University of Illinois Champaign-Urbana, and again, similar articles plus from EDS and catalog, but then also looking at their LibGuides integration, saying, hey, are you looking for these types of subject-specific resources over here? So EDS, it does integrate with lots and lots of tools. We've done native integrations with catalogs kind of all over. With about 10,000 libraries worldwide using EDS, there's lots of pockets of regional ILS providers. For instance, some of these are in Japan and Korea, Fuchinori and HiWeb, HiWeb's Taiwan, Fuchinori's in Japan. So there's lots of these regional providers, and we want to make sure that EDS can plug into those ILS systems so that if a patron is searching the ILS, they get results not only for the bibliographic records, but for the electronic records too. But we don't just integrate with just ILS, we also want to integrate with other library resources. Again, we know that it's not just the ILS that libraries have within their collections, archives and repositories and other toolkits they have. We want to make sure that we're integrating with those, whether they come in from EDS or they come into those tools generally directly, and we need to point them back to article content. You could do integrations at both ends. And then just a highlight as we wrap up here about what it is that's been selected by the Geodigital Library, by the Geo Institute. For library tools from EBSCO specific is EDS. Lots of libraries worldwide using EDS, as I said, about 10,000. I did target this group here on the right because these are also libraries that are doing EDS, Folio, and Open Athens. So all three of them. And we can see here at Chalmers, not only when I log into my account here, if I have physical collections, I can actually place holds and do all of my OPAC level functionality right from EDS, fed from Folio as a backend. So here I'm in Folio and I can see my indexing profiles, ingestion profiles of data, or I can look across the inventory applications to see a physical collection availability or anything else. There's lots of functionality in Folio, of course. And then Open Athens, I don't think there's going to be a session on Open Athens. Just, you know, 15-second high level. Open Athens is an authentication tool. It's the leading authentication tool right now in libraries that are looking for SAML. SAML is Secure Access Markup Language, I believe. Basically, essentially what it is it's a tokenization of a library session so that their session persists through a period of time, and no matter where they came in, a single sign-on, no matter where they signed in at, they can get access throughout that footprint of resources that the library has access to in that one session without signing in again. And additionally, SAML is secure and private versus proxy in general is not. Open Athens supports both because not all library resources are SAML compliant. But right now, Open Athens is the only SAML compliant authentication tool across libraries worldwide. And not only does it have the ability to add in resources that are part of the multiple federations that it's aligned with, but it's got built-in analytics. And you can see right here, it's probably really hard to see, but if I'm coming right into a resource direct, and I never went to the library to begin with, you can actually log in via your Open Athens credentials in most primary publishers today. So in case the library is completely being bypassed, you can still authenticate with library credentials and the library can still get analytics on that usage, even if the library was never gone to or no library resources leveraged there. So some pretty good toolkits there from Open